All right, it's live.
Good evening, welcome to Rectory Ramblings, and this is, well, Haggard won't be quiet, okay. I'm Father Scalia, welcome back to Rectory Ramblings. This is the episode 51, so it's prime time, prime number.
Oh.
Okay. All right, this is Father Agent. So, good. Well, let's jump in then. And we have a question from Befuddled and False Church. Okay, so this question is about God's omnipotence. Okay, we say that God, we believe in God, the Father Almighty, right? Almighty. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean he can do anything? Are there any limits to God's power? Or, to put it another way, in the classic theological question that is posed by 8th graders throughout the world, if God is all-powerful, can do anything, can he make a rock so big even he can't move it?
Oh. Okay.
So this is our first question. So talking about the omnipotence of God. What does it mean that God is almighty?
Yeah. Almighty means he has all power. All might belongs to him.
And that if there's any power anywhere in creation, it is...
it finds its origin in him.
It finds its origin in him, right.
So he can do all things.
So there's no limit to what he can do.
Well, okay, he can't do something that's a logical contradiction. He can't make a square circle.
He can't make 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
Right. He can't do things that are unreasonable. He does things that are beyond reason, or at least beyond our capacity of reason. But he can't do things that are logical contradictions, a square circle.
Yeah. Or making a rock so heavy that even you can lift it.
Cutting up your spaghetti.
Yeah.
Terrible things like that. He would never do that. Right. So, okay. So,
well, and evil. God cannot do evil.
Right. Okay.
So that's another. It's a
which is good. Evil is unreasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how should we describe? So there are limits to his power then.
Understood. So, well.
So the Catechism has this great line. It says,
Yeah.
God's almighty power is in no way arbitrary. So it's not like he just says, well, I want to do this today. Today the sun rose in the east. Tomorrow I'm going to make it rise in the west. He doesn't. It's not arbitrary. He doesn't just. when Scripture says God does whatever He pleases, it doesn't mean that He's capricious and arbitrary.
Right. Right. Which is how some people understand God.
Right.
They might reject Him, in fact, because they see Him as this capricious, arbitrary, powerful being that they want no part of. Right.
Yeah. And so what is it that guides His power? That's pretty much what we're getting at. Is it that His power is not just power, almighty power, but there is some that it participates in something else, or it's guided by something else.
Yeah, which is His wisdom. Yeah.
Right.
Now, you just made me think of that line that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Tends to corrupt absolutely.
Tends to corrupt absolutely.
Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, so the reason that that's not true of God, who is absolute and almighty power, is because it's guided by His wisdom. His wisdom. It's not just arbitrary. It's not just raw power.
It is power united with His wisdom, His intellect. Yeah.
And every attribute of God is in Him one. Yeah. And not opposed to the others. We have to kind of
distinguish them because of our rational soul. We need to make these distinctions, which I know you hate to do, but we have to do it sometimes. And in Him they are perfectly one. But for our purposes, we distinguish them. The danger, of course, is that our distinctions become separations, and so that we, instead of distinguishing His power from His wisdom, we separate them so that His power is some kind of like some unguided missile. And so when we run into for example, contradictions in Scripture, for example, Abraham being told to go sacrifice Isaac, we struggle with that passage, and Jews and Christians have struggled with that for millennia. And the reason we struggle with it is because of our conviction that God's power does not contradict His wisdom, that He would not give a command if it were not good. And so how can this be good? How does this fit in? There's a complete trust in the goodness of what He commands, but this one looks ridiculous. So we struggle with it. But there are other lines of thought that say, well, God can be contradictory. He can will one thing today, another thing tomorrow. It doesn't matter, and that's necessary for being almighty. So, does God command things do things become good because God commands them, or are they good? Does He command them because they're good?
This is an age-old question that I believe Plato asked, right? Not about God, but about the gods, the divine. And I don't think it's a clear one or the other answer for us as Christians. And here's what I mean. On the one hand, if you say something is just good because God said so, it would appear that it's not something inherent in the thing which makes it good or evil. It's simply the arbitrary will of God. So if God commanded something that's actually evil, and God said it was good, that would make it good. There's something wrong about that. And it's like we were just saying, that His power is guided by His wisdom. It's not arbitrary. But if, on the other hand, you say that God says it's good because it's good, you could misunderstand that and think, well, okay, there's actually this higher power than God.
Right.
You could look at it in this way, like logic is this thing that's higher than God that bounds God by it. Either logic or something else. In fact, God is the creator of all that exists, and if an action or a type of action is inherently good or evil, it's inherently good because God made it that way. It is a product of His will, right?
Right, but it is a product of His will, bounded by His wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think that's at the heart of God is the logos, reason, the word.
Yeah.
What is logical, right? and it's not pure will. It is the logos, and so it is in the service of that and through that he does all things, which is why we're convinced that the things that he does are good and reasonable, not because there's a higher like God says, well, I'd like to do it otherwise, but it wouldn't be logical, and so I have to do it this way. Right. No, it is his perfection and good that is being expressed through his will.
Yeah. So it's not that there's a higher standard that God is bound by, but that standard of truth and goodness and logic and all that is an expression of God's own nature.
Yeah.
This is who God is, and his wisdom is expressed in the reality of things.
Right, and there are a couple of implications of that. So first is and there's a line of thought in Islam that Allah, in order for Allah to be all powerful, he cannot be bound by anything, even by reason. He in order for him to be almighty, he must be able to contradict himself. Mm-hmm. And so you have you have contradictory verses in the Quran, and this line of thought would say, well, that's fine, because Allah can contradict himself. Well, then how do you construct a way of life? How do you do science on that basis? Because if we don't know what God's going to do, if he can contradict himself at any moment, then everything in the world becomes unpredictable, and we don't really know, what to expect. I think another implication of this is, and it's one of the most powerful verses in the Psalms, that we become like what we worship. I mean, that's not the psalm itself, but that's the point of it, is that what we worship, we become transformed into that. Mm-hmm. And so if we're worshiping a God who is pure will, like Allah, then we become just willful. Mm-hmm. And our will is sort of unbounded. Mm-hmm. But if we're worshiping a God at whose center is the logos and really truth and reason, then we start to live that way and construct a society according to it as well. Mm-hmm. That's what these things are, not just sort of interesting things, but they have concrete effects.
Yeah, huge consequences.
The Catechism has this wonderful. It talks about how God's his fatherhood and his power shed light on one another, because we don't just say that he's almighty. He is the Father Almighty. Mm-hmm. And so his almighty power is at the service. It expresses his fatherhood, and his love for us. So, okay, good. Before we move on, anything else on this point on God's almighty power?
I like the point you and the Catechism brought up there. His fatherhood and omnipotence are connected, and it has everything to do with his providence, that he cares for us, because he is both a father who loves, and he has the power to provide.
Right.
So a weak father who can't provide for us, well, he wouldn't be provident. On the other hand, an all-powerful God who doesn't really love us or care for us wouldn't be provident either. So both of those things are
and that's a great, and we see that reflected in society in sort of, I think, failures of fathers. So a father who might love but is weak and won't lead. Mm-hmm. Well, he kind of does a disservice to his children. Mm-hmm. No matter how much he might love them, he needs to be strong for them. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, sort of a strong father who is not at the same time loving, well, can kind of be tyrannical. Mm-hmm. And that's not beneficial either. So we see that kind of reflected in God's creation and reflected in things. So true fatherhood is found in that power that is gentle. Mm-hmm. and expressive of love. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Moving on then. Let's do. Okay. So this is kind of scolded here. Long-time viewer said, I had a couple of questions for you on topics related to what was discussed yesterday. One question I submitted a while back but was never answered. Uh-oh. So, could you review particular and general judgment? Yes. But it goes on. There's more to it. Okay. Will the effects of confessed sins, perhaps on other people we've hurt or didn't help, be shown to us? Will we be shown every way we've offended God, even if we didn't realize it was an offense at the time?
Yep.
Yes. Want to elaborate on that, Father?
Yeah. So at the final judgment, everything, all of history has been completed, and there's the general judgment. We will get to see kind of the big picture, and all of not just our own sins and the effects, and not just our own good deeds and their effects, but kind of all of humanity as it's woven together, and we'll get to see what God made out of all of that, right?
Why is that necessary?
It's just cool to see.
Awesome. No, I think it actually touches back. Touches to. I mean, you're talking about God's providence, and there's a matter of justice too. It's like, well, how in order for God to reveal His justice, all things, He shows everything so that we will know that He is just in dealing with things. There will be no doubt as all things are revealed. Will the effects of confessed sins be shown to us? I don't think we should think of it as being shown to us, like, look what you did. But more, all things will be revealed, and we will see them. But I think we will be more attentive to God's justice and mercy that is being shown in the general judgment than we will to our own particular, like, going, "Ooh, I can't believe I did that."
Yeah, I'm so embarrassed.
Right. Oh, don't look.
Yeah, but so in this lifetime, we often struggle with, why is God permitting this to happen or that?
Right.
And we will get to see all of that, and we will get to see the effects of our own sins, but not just that. We'll see how God brought good out of all of that.
Right.
There's a saying. God writes straight with crooked lines.
Yeah, it's a great proverb, and we will see our sins, but especially the confessed sins, we'll see the good that was brought out of our repentance. Another image that is used for God's providence is of a tapestry. You can go to the National Gallery of Art and see the big some medieval tapestries, and they're beautiful. But that's not the side that we see during this life. We see the opposite side, where it's all these strings sticking out, and you're like, this looks like it's a mess. And from that side, it does look like it is a mess. But at the general judgment or universal judgment, we will see God's tapestry in its perfection and in its fullness, and we'll say, okay, now I get it. I didn't see where that thread was leading, but now I see it here. Okay. What do you have there?
Okay. If a person drops a host because of infirmity or just a plain mistake, is it a mortal sin? Do you confess that?
Now, that's a great question. So first, we don't have to confess only mortal sins, right? We can confess venial sins as well. So you can confess it. The second thing is, if something is done by accident, it can't be a mortal sin. So what's necessary for a mortal sin is a deliberate choice to do it, not because of infirmity or because, what was the other one?
Just a plain mistake.
Yeah. So now, that said, if there is sort of a deliberate negligence about things, like I wasn't paying attention, and I should have been paying attention, there's a certain degree of culpability there. But generally, if it's an accident, I think it probably should be confessed that, gosh, I wasn't paying attention as much as I should have.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think most of us priests have had the experience of maybe dropping a host or something like that. Well, that's going to happen. It's a fallen world, and but then it's called to say, well, maybe I need to be more attentive to my treatment of the Blessed Sacrament, and in the particulars there. So
right. And we want to be as careful as we can, as reverent as we can, But even there are times when you're doing all the right things and still an
Some-
accident happens.
Exactly.
I mean, let's say you're a parent and you receive, and your kid kicks you in the shin really
Right.
hard, and that, yeah. But I think when we're doing everything properly, it at least minimizes the risk of dropping the host.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
if we're receiving on the tongue, that we do so properly.
By which we mean extending the tongue properly and remaining still.
Yeah.
Because one of the difficulties in distributing communion on the tongue is that people move, and really they should just remain still. This is why, especially during the pandemic, we've asked people to stand or kneel at the altar rail, because it's easier for us to give communion to someone who's not in a line that's moving but is stationary there at the rail.
Yeah, that's I noticed the difference right away when we did that, because whenever there's contact on the mouth, it's usually as a result of someone like coming forward in line and kind of moving
They're
forward.
still moving.
It's harder to hit a moving target. But
Right.
when that's one of the practical advantages of the altar rail is it helps keep people stationary. Now it doesn't guarantee that people can still move their heads, but the point about being stationary is it's easier to do when you're there at the rail.
And I think as regards communion in the hand, that it be hands be flat, one on top of the other.
Yeah.
Because if the hand's like that, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah,
But when it's flat.
You're far more likely to drop a host when, say, you leave a big gap in your hands and then you open them and the host falls,
Right.
or if they're kind of curled up, or anything but this flat. Right.
Yeah. And I haven't been able to find it, but there's the ancient description of how to receive, and it's describes it just as that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another one here from the same person who scolded us. You know who you are. Also, I was wondering about the marital bond of which you were speaking. Okay, so last time we talked about marriage and the intentions and the capability that are necessary to contract a valid marriage. I was thinking about how baptism is such an important sacrament that it can be performed by anyone in case of emergencies. Okay, so that's right. Baptism, because it is the foundational sacrament, because it is so necessary for salvation. Anybody can perform it. Priests and deacons are able to do the solemn rite of baptism. Okay. The rite confers all of the graces and gifts that go with it if done properly, even if it's not done by a deacon or priest. Right. Okay. So a baptism, even if it's done by, whoever, at the side of the road as a person's dying, it still confers all of the grace of baptism. It seems that marriages can be performed by anyone and assumed by the church to be legitimate, but the sacramental graces wouldn't be there if it wasn't done in the Catholic rite. Well, okay, this thing gets a little different. So the Catholic Church sees, we see, because it is true, that marriage is a natural institution, and so it's not just baptized people or even believers of any kind who can get validly married. There's such a thing as a natural institution of marriage. So if two non-baptized people get married, we presume they're married. And we presume that marriage is permanent, faithful, open to life, and all that. But since they're not baptized, they don't have the sacramental graces.
Yeah, so to nuance a little bit what the questioner said, it's not that the sacrament is only between Catholics. Between any two baptized people. And it can get pretty messy with all the different combinations of what there could be. And maybe we could go through some of those. But the basic principle is that whenever you have a valid marriage between two baptized people, it is a sacramental marriage bond.
Right.
Yeah.
And we hold this to be true even if other denominations don't hold it to be true.
Right.
So if two evangelicals who are baptized, if they get married, we regard that as a sacramental marriage. They don't, but we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now here's another thing that kind of jumps in here, is that any baptized Catholic is bound by canon law. And one of those requirements of canon law is that in order for you to validly marry, you must marry in the church. Or have the proper dispensation.
Okay, hold on. So you're throwing out a lot here. All
Okay.
right, so slow down. So first of all, why are baptized Catholics bound by canon law?
It's the law of the church into which we're baptized.
It's just making us legalists here.
No, I mean law is for the good of any society in general. Even in the natural order, we have laws, and it's for the good of the structure of the society. Yeah. Well, the church is a kind of society. It's both a divine and a human society.
And it is a corporate society. It is a body. Yeah. And in order for the body to function properly, there need to be laws about it. Yeah. Yeah. And so the church has rules about has canons and laws about marriage, just as the state of Virginia does. Mm-hmm. And the state of Virginia's laws about marriage might not be the same as the state of Maryland, so the District of Columbia. So the church says when you are baptized, it's not an individualistic thing just between you and Christ. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes in the discussion of Christianity is the separation between Christ and the church. Mm. And when the person is baptized, that person, it's not just this individualistic personal relationship with Christ. That personal relationship with Christ is inextricably bound with the relationship with the church. Mm-hmm. And so by baptism, yes, the person is bound to Christ by way of his mystical body. Mm-hmm. And so by being made a member of the body, now they have all the obligations of canon law, but you left something out too. They also have the privileges of canon law. They have all of the rights.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't mention that.
Well, the only thing I mentioned was canonical form for marriage. I mean, there's a
lot
more.
All the obligations with you, isn't it?
I just mentioned one obligation.
Yeah, well, didn't mention any rights, did you?
Okay. So what this means is you can't, if you're a Catholic, just marry in a purely civil ceremony. It won't be sacramental. But remember that principle. Between two baptized people, if they're validly married, they're sacramental. Well, it works in reverse. That if they're not sacramentally married, they're not validly married either.
Okay. Hold on a second.
The two go together. You can't.
A Catholic. Okay, if it's two baptized persons, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
so
two baptized persons who do not marry, or two baptized Catholics who do not marry in the church. What do you mean by in the church?
You go, you call your parish. You go through marriage preparation. Everything from that point on, the priest will ensure that the proper form takes place.
Yeah. I think we have to be clear. When we say in the church, we mean church with a capital C.
Yeah.
Now Catholics really should marry in the church building as well, lowercase c. Mm-hmm. But when we say marriage in the church, in Spanish, the expression is por la iglesia. It's like through the church, right? Yeah. And according to the church's laws. Right. The same way, again, the civil example, if you don't get married according to the civil laws of the District of Columbia, they'll say, well, we never recognize that marriage. Mm-hmm. And that's the same with the church. Right. A member of this society who does not marry according to its laws, we say, well, we don't recognize that.
Right.
So if it's two baptized Catholics, or just one baptized Catholic and a baptized Baptist, and they don't marry in the church, it's not recognized.
Right. So you brought up a good point that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the parish church. It could be, a Catholic marrying a Baptist, and maybe that person's family won't set foot in a Catholic church. Well, you can get a dispensation for the wedding to take place in the Baptist church. And with that dispensation, then you're good to go. It's a valid marriage.
Even so, I did a wedding between a Catholic and a Jewish man, and they actually did end up getting married in the church building, the parish church. But an option for them would have been like a hotel ballroom with a proper permission of the church to do that, in recognition of the difference. But yeah.
Right. So yeah, do we want to go through some of the combinations that there could be? First of all, a Catholic could marry a non-Christian. The person's not even baptized. So in this case, is that a sacramental marriage?
Okay. Say it again.
A Catholic is marrying a non-Christian, someone who's not even baptized.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
Is that a sacramental marriage?
No.
No, because they're not both baptized.
Both people have to be baptized
Right.
in order for it to be a sacramental marriage.
Right. But in this case, it's still a valid marriage.
Exactly.
If they get married according to the laws of the Catholic Church.
And this is the important. This is where the church really comes to the defense of what is natural.
Yeah.
And defending marriage as a natural institution, a natural good, sort of a sacred thing in a natural manner. So yes, a baptized Catholic and a non-baptized Protestant, or any other religion.
Yeah.
It could be valid but not sacramental.
Yeah. Now,
Which means that there are not sacramental graces available to that marriage. But as you pointed out last time, there are those actual graces.
Yeah.
I was going to say occasional.
Okay.
Occasionally get it.
Okay, but now let's say that they're validly married. It's a natural but not sacramental marriage. Now let's say the person is interested in becoming Catholic, goes through RCIA, is baptized. Now, do they get married again in the church to make it a sacramental marriage? How does that work?
No. Once that person is baptized, that also sanctifies the marriage. It makes the marriage also sacramental.
Boom. So the marriage bond, which is already
so it's
there,
actually it's kind of a twofer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the baptism, that person's baptized and sacrament of marriage comes about
it was
too.
a lawful marriage, a valid marriage, and now at the moment of baptism, it becomes sacramental as well.
Right.
It's not like a new bond has to be created.
Right, because the bond is already there, but it's just sanctified. And the wedding ceremony says, it talks about a sacred seal, that the marriage is sealed, which is, I love that imagery because a seal shows that it has been sort of approved. It shows, first of all, sort of solidity, right? But it also sort of shows authority. Like you've been authorized. So, okay.
Gonna do another scenario, or?
Yeah, you've been like, all right.
Okay, so
spending all day. Did you do anything else today except think of scenarios?
What if? Well, we do this all the time. So,
True.
What if you have two people who? Well, let's do two non-baptized people. They're validly married, right? A natural marriage. They just got civilly married, whatever. Okay.
And one of them converts and gets baptized. Then what?
Okay, nothing changes now, right?
Right.
But both of them get baptized. Boom, it's a sacramental marriage.
Right.
Okay. Now, what if you have two baptized Protestants who marry however they do?
Boom, sacrament.
Yeah, it's already but now what if they become Catholic?
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes. They're already sacramental. They were already sacramentally married. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Even if their own church didn't recognize it as
well,
a sacrament, as you said before.
Right, exactly. Is that they might not recognize, but we do.
We do.
Yeah. Or all people who are recognized as married under civil law also recognized as married by the church, regardless of what was said done at the marriage ceremony. So, okay. So under civil law, let's say two Baptists get married civilly, go to justice of peace. We say, yeah, that's a marriage. Unless there's something indicates otherwise, we presume that is a marriage. But if it, as you mentioned before, if it's a baptized Catholic and going to justice of peace with a non-Catholic, or two Catholics going to justice of peace, not marrying in the church or through the church, no,
not valid.
Yeah.
In addition to that,
can I say a little, because this asks, regardless of what was said / done at the marriage ceremony.
Right.
And this is why, kind of, okay, what was said or done at the marriage ceremony? Because it was, were there words spoken that sort of spoke against one of the goods of marriage?
Right. Right. Or if so, those four properties of marriage. There's unity, indissolubility, fidelity, and openness to life. Well, even the most basic thing of the unity could be contradicted. For example, here's an easy example. Right now in the United States, two people of the same sex could go through a wedding ceremony. So you could have a man attempting to marry another man. Well, clearly, no, that's not a valid marriage.
Okay, but let's say, what about open marriages? I mean, some people advocate that, and so if a man and a woman marry, and in their vows they express that, they say, we leave the right for, other relationships. Okay, well,
so it lacks the good of fidelity.
Yeah. So, but it has to be kind of evident in the ceremony.
Yeah. Or so another example would be the indissolubility. If the
right.
somehow explicitly says that this is not a permanent union.
Right. For as long as love shall endure. I've heard that wedding vow. No, it's until death, and your love might actually not endure until death. Yeah. This is important, but this is an example of how the church shows great reverence for what is natural and great reverence for the individual's capacity to commit to something, and so some people get very upset because the church does not recognize divorce, doesn't like divorce, right? I mean, sometimes we have to accept it, but and divorce and remarriage, and we say, well, no, actually, we're holding you to the commitment that you made because we think highly enough of you that you did make that commitment, and you should be held to that commitment because you were the one who made it, and it wasn't somebody else. And we presume that when people marry, that they are committing to these things, and I think that's a reasonable presumption on the church's part. So, okay, is that enough? Yeah, it's enough. It's not everything.
I think
marriage.
I answered the
marriage is one of it's one of the most difficult. And you know what? In a sense, it's not surprising. John Paul II has this extraordinary line in his letter to the families how marriage and family is at the center of the battle between good and evil. One of these idiots goes on. I'm like, what? And nothing new under the sun. Adam and Eve are set against one another in the garden. John the Baptist is the precursor of our Lord, the one who resembles our Lord so much that people think that he's the Messiah. He is martyred in defense of marriage. And today we see that marriage again is in the forefront. And well, our diocesan patron, Thomas More, he dies in defense of marriage, ultimately. I mean, we hold him up as a defender of religious freedom, and that's true. But it was really about marriage fundamentally. Mm-hmm. And, in the end, the church is the bride of Christ, and so she is, I mean, it shouldn't be surprising that marriage is such a controversy because it is in the evil one's best interest to damage the template of salvation. The template of salvation is marriage, because salvation really is the marriage between Christ and the church. And every marriage here should approximate that and point us to it. Mm-hmm. So on that cheerful note, we will good. So we'll be back Friday, I think. Right. We won't have Father Agin with us, but I'll be back anyway. So hope to see you then, or be seen. God bless.